figuras más influyentes en la transformación digital global. Les voy a contar algunos datos importantes de este gran personaje que nos acompaña. Nacido en una familia de refugiados estonios y criado en Estados Unidos, Ilves posee una licenciatura de la Universidad de Columbia y una maestría de la Universidad de Pensilvania. A lo largo de su carrera desempeñó roles claves como embajador de Estonia en Estados Unidos y ministro de Relaciones Exteriores, donde jugó un papel decisivo para que su país se uniera a la Unión Europea y a la OTAN en el año 2004. Durante su presidencia destacó por liderar la gobernanza digital y la ciberseguridad. Es reconocido por transformar a Estonia en una de las naciones más avanzadas a nivel digital. Con sus políticas impulsó una inversión significativa en el futuro tecnológico del país. Tras dejar el cargo, fue investigador en Stanford y continuó impartiendo conferencias a nivel mundial sobre digitalización y servicios públicos. Actualmente asesora a la Organización Mundial de la Salud en soluciones tecnológicas y enseña en la prestigiosa Universidad de Tartu. Le vamos a dar la bienvenida, como se merece, nuestro invitado de honor. Bienvenido a Guatemala, el expresidente Ilves, con nosotros para compartir sus conocimientos. Bienvenido.
Buenas tardes. A empezar voy a hablar en inglés porque hace 53 años que no he estudiado español y he olvidado todo, especialmente mi vocabulario, y tal vez hablaré en inglés. So, I come from a little country that was once very, very poor. And today is one of, I would say, the 3 most digitalized countries in the world, along with, say, Denmark and Singapore. And we have gone from being extremely poor to being rather well off. And so what I'm going to do today is talk about how we did it, what we did, and why you should do it. The why you should do it is that basically, in this modern world, unless you have fantastic mineral resources or something to pump out of the ground, the only way you're going to be able to compete is by being digitalized in a very serious way. And it's also the competitive advantage that you will have over other countries if you do it. What I will do is talk about how we did it. A lot of what we did is, has changed since we did it, since Moore's Law, you probably know what Moore's Law is, but has made many things much, much cheaper in the digital world than when we started. But nonetheless, there are other things that are more expensive, and clearly one difference between when we started and today as artificial intelligence, which is a huge possibility if you get in now, and I will talk about getting in early. So, where are we in digitalization in my country? In my country, there's only one interaction between the citizen and the state that you cannot do online: get divorced. You can get married, but you can't get divorced. You have to show up for that. All other services, public services, are online. 99 point I don't know what % of income taxes are done online, and basically they're done in a matter of minutes or less. Virtually all our prescriptions are not only done digitally, but as a result of something that we developed long ago, but started pushing in other countries, is that you in fact can take out your digital prescriptions already now in 12 countries in the European Union. So if I were to go to Portugal or to Croatia, and I get sick, I take my digital ID, I authenticate myself, the pharmacist will see, oh, here's this person's prescriptions, and so with my cholesterol, I get my statins. So these are the kinds of things you can do. And one of the other benefits is that we are now not only by far the least corrupt former communist country, but we're one of the least corrupt countries in the European Union. We once were terrible. Digitization has made us not only one of the least corrupt countries, but also many of the EU countries, the old big EU countries that used to say to us, oh, you people are all corrupt in Eastern Europe. Now I say, you know, you guys have a corruption problem, Belgium. We don't really need your advice anymore. So there's a lot that can be done. Briefly, why did we do this? All right, Estonia is a small country, like basically all of Central and Eastern Europe. We became independent in 1918 with Woodrow Wilson after the First World War. And then in 1940, we were occupied by the Soviet Union, then we were occupied by the Nazis, then we were reoccupied by the Soviet Union. So we had a history of actually being independent. If you read the Cambridge Economic History of Europe, Volume 2, you can find there a graph of countries and how they were doing in the past. And there's a graph where our closest neighbor, culturally, linguistically, and otherwise, Finland, was slightly poorer in terms of GDP per capita than Estonia. So we were a little bit richer, but basically the same level. That was the last year before World War II came and you couldn't measure anything anymore. In 1992, which is the first year of our independence, or re-establishment of independence, where it was the first full year, the GDP of Finland was basically $24,000 US nominal. Our GDP was $2,800 nominal. So Finland, in the process, had become 8 times richer than we were in the same time. So this was rather depressing. And I faced this because I was the first post-occupation ambassador to Washington, and they would occasionally not send me money to pay the rent. So it was, I immediately saw what it was like to be very poor. And it's not simply a matter of the difference in measured GDP per capita, because in 50 years of occupation, there's all the things we didn't do. We didn't build, we didn't get new roads, new hospitals, we didn't get a brand new telecommunication system. Everything was just in bad shape. So GDP is not simply only how much you earn, but also what you already have there. And so we were in really bad shape. Now in this, those of you who remember the Greek philosopher Zeno, he had several paradoxes, and one of them was his paradox of Achilles and the tortoise, where Achilles, the fastest man on earth, runs after the tortoise or the turtle, but the paradox is that by the time he gets to where the tortoise has moved on. And then he runs after the tortoise. By the time he gets to where the tortoise was, the tortoise has moved on again. This is the fundamental problem of development, because you don't catch up unless you do something very different. If we had in, say, 1992, a fantastic growth rate of 10% a year, and Finland had a measly growth rate of 1.5%, they would still get more rich than we would get, given the low base that we started from. So I was sort of pondering this, pondering not getting paid. And I realized what we needed with all of the development that had gone on in the Western world when we were occupied, that we needed to find something where we could be in a level playing field, where we are all starting out in the same place. Well, one area which had to do with my own education, and I'll come back to education, but I had this extremely unique opportunity to learn in 1971, when I was 16 years old, how to program computers. I had a math teacher. She was doing her PhD in math education. She said, let's see if we can teach kids to program. And she rented a teletype machine with a perfo tape and a modem connected to a mainframe 50 kilometers away. And I learned how to code. It was nothing to me. It was just like, okay, now I know how to do that. So what? And I went to college and I saw little ads saying, you can get some $2 an hour by programming a little computer. It was the first commercially available lab computer. It was a PDP-8, called the PDP-8, because it had 8K of memory in it, and that meant that's as much as an empty email is today, but in 1975, 8K of memory was a lot. And of course, because its computational power and its memory was so limited, I had to program in assembler language. Those of you who know anything about computer languages know it's a hexadecimal system, 0 through 9, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and that's all you have. I did that, and I said, okay, great. So I was never afraid of computers, thanks to this initial beginning when I was in school. 25 years after that, I'm the ambassador in Washington, and one of my friends who knew I kind of like computers sent me an email saying, you ought to check this thing out. This just came out. And what it was something called Mosaic, which came out in June, July of 1993, and that was the first ever web browser. Unlike today, when you download a web browser from the internet for free, I had to go to a store long out of business called Radio Shack and buy a package to prevent theft with 7 floppy disks. I took it home, I uploaded it, and then I saw, for the first time in my life, World Wide Web. Now, the World Wide Web had been invented 4 years before that by Tim Berners-Lee. That's the HTTP when you open up a web page. That's hypertext transfer protocol. That was all great because then you see all these numbers, letters, and symbols. But you couldn't go anywhere with that because if you wanted to find a web page, you'd have to type them all out. Mosaic was the first thing where you put in, whatever you want to look for. You just put the name and then it'll find it for you. And I looked at this, I said, this is what we've been looking for all this time. This is where everybody is just starting out. If people are just getting Mosaic right now, this is what we should be doing. So I went to the government, I was the ambassador, and I said, look guys, if we really want to get ahead, we're going to have to digitize, because this is the one place where we are not behind everyone else for 50 years. And so I proposed, because of my own background, having this education and learning to program, I said, what we need to do is start with the kids, because the older people are going to be against it anyway, or they won't be interested. You put computers, you don't even have to teach the kids, though it helps, that they will start playing with it, and maybe they'll break a computer or two, but they will get there and they will figure it out. And so we came up with a program. Fortunately, and these are the contingencies of history, for basically 6 months, we had a minister of education who had a PhD in astrophysics who said, this is a great idea. He went to the government. If he hadn't been there, the previous minister, the later minister, they would have said it's stupid, but he said this is a great idea. We pushed through this program, and what we did was basically based on the same principle that Nicholas Taleb talks about, skin in the game. We said, if you want this thing to work, the municipalities that are in charge of education will also have to pay something. Otherwise, you're just going to distribute computers and it'll gather dust and nothing will ever happen. They need to have something in it. So we offered this program in the beginning saying, okay, we will pay for half a computer if your municipality will pay for the other half. And we will connect you. So we got 4 or 5 schools in the beginning, and they got their computers. And then what kicked in was that great motivator of society, envy. Because every municipality had 3 or 4 towns around it, and they would say, why do they have that? Why don't we have that? They will complain to their own government or municipal government, and pretty soon everybody in the country every school had computers in it. And so by 1998, having started in 96, by 1998, all Estonian schools were online and connected with computer labs. Now this was a big enough success that the private sector looked at this and said, well, this is a pretty neat thing, and if we can get other people to get online, we can save a lot of money. We can sell things on the internet. We can, in fact, solve one of our big problems. With all our little villages, we had to have a brick and mortar bank in every single little village, at least one, if not more. And so we started a second program. The first one we called Tiger Leap. I mean, some journalists called it a Tiger Leap, and it's known as that since then as leaping like a tiger into the future. I don't know, I didn't pick the name. The next program we came up with, again, with NGOs, private sector, mainly banks, and the government, was a program to teach the rural population how to use computers. So, I mean, I'd go on these trips sometime, we'd go in with a bus, put out 200 computers, connect them all up. Pensioners, farmers would come in, we'd say, this is how it works. And then part of this program was to put into into municipal centers, libraries, and so forth, computer banks that people could come and use, because computers are expensive. We were still very poor. I mean, and even as late as 1999, only 36% of American US households had a computer at home. So if you think about a poor East European country, forget about it. No one had computers. So this way people could have access to computers and start to do online banking, online purchases, and so forth. And then across the country, we have all these signs that would direct people to an internet access point. So we'd have we chose the @ symbol, and we say 200 meters to an internet point. All right, so this was going rather well, and already by then we were more digitized than a number of countries, most countries in Europe, but that was not enough. And we realized that if we really wanted to digitize, we'd have to do some fundamental issues that I will ask you to bear along with me, but in order to really have the internet work, you need a couple of things. First of all, you need everyone in the country to have a unique, secure, digital identity. If you remember, there was once a famous cartoon of 2 dogs, and one dog says to the other in front of a computer saying, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. Well, that is the fundamental problem of digitization. You have to know who you're talking to before you send them money. The bank has to know you are you before they give you money. And so we created a system so that we have unique digital identities in the form back then of something you already have here. In Guatemala, you have a chip card. And this chip card operates on 2 principles. 2 fundamental principles. One is 2-factor authentication. That means when you use the chip card, you also need a PIN, and that gives you what you need for 2-factor authentication. And we had end-to-end encryption. So we made all our services based available on digitally. It took a number of years to get there. We started off with taxes because people hate doing taxes. We said if you do it online, identify yourself digitally, you will be able to do your taxes in a matter of minutes. And if you don't do it online, well, we'll get around to looking at the paperwork whenever we get around to it. So that was one problem, and we've solved that. The second problem was, how do you store the data? And we realized that we don't have enough money to have a big data center, not then. And we have all these servers all over the place. So what we should do is actually connect all of these servers. You know, the Foreign Ministry is a server, the Ministry of Social Affairs, there's lots of servers. There are all these servers all over the place. So some very smart, really brilliant computer scientists, graduate students, invented an open source software program, or platform rather, that connects everything up if you want it. But why it is so brilliant is that the way it works, it is technically called the distributed data exchange layer, but that means that, say I have my medical records, maybe that little, say it's that one of those bulbs over there. Someone else's medical records are stored somewhere else in some other bulb over there. And my property records are over there, and someone else's property records are over there. They can be anywhere, and they're only connected via my ID. I can look at any of them, but only via my ID. Now this is distinct from the entire model used generally of a big data center, and you have everything in one place. The worst example of this is the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM hack, in the United States from 2015, 15 years after we started this, where all the personnel, all the records of all federal employees in the United States, including things such as CIA officer psychological profiles, Secret Service agent, telephone numbers, they were all in one place. And not only that, they were not even encrypted. And someone went in and just sucked it all out. And so if there's anyone who's ever worked for the US federal government, you'll know that your data is somewhere probably around Beijing. But the key to this working, and so that every interaction will work, is authenticating you, to make sure that you are you, where you use your two-factor authentication and you want to connect to say your bank or to your healthcare records. You need to make sure you are you and only you can get it. For that, you need an authentication center that issues the certificate that says you are you and you have access to what you have a right to do. That's expensive. And so since our banks so loved this system because it was so much more secure than any other banking system, online banking system anywhere, we ended up doing a 50-50 public-private partnership that works to this day, where we have an authentication center, a third body, and it does all of the interactions, all of the authentications, and it's paid for half by the government, half by the banks, who of course are the biggest users of authentication because all transactions go through this. So let me repeat, what do we have? We have a secure identity. You have this already. A platform, which you can look up, for a YouTube explanation, you look up X-Road Estonia, and you can see how it works in a very short video. And then to really make it work, you need to have a digital signature law. You have a law that makes a wet signature, or one that you write with, legally equivalent to a digital signature. And that underlies all transactions. You can sign contracts, you write checks. I mean, the legal status of a lot of online banking for me is kind of like, I don't know if that's really legal or not, but in this case, it is completely legal because you have signed a document. It's like signing a check. This platform, just for your knowledge, I mean, we're still relatively poor back then. We were better off, but not that much. It's open source. It was our first form of foreign aid. We give away the source code for that. It is, since open source, I mean, you want it, the Estonian government will give it to you. 25 governments around the world use our platform today. And in this neighborhood, to varying degrees, it's used by both Costa Rica and by Panama. So if you guys are interested, we're happy to give it to you. And much of what we have done since then is, what did I say? All right. So what the effects of doing this have been rather massive. I think my pages got mixed up here. All right. Well, then, if you think ahead, I don't know how much you people are concerned with like the sort of like the nitty-gritty of this stuff. But anyone who's been involved with digitization knows that big concern is privacy. What do we do about privacy? What happens if someone finds something out? Well, yeah, privacy is a problem, and we deal with that legally, and we also have a log of all interactions, so if data somehow gets leaked, it's one way of finding out what's going. But far more important than privacy in terms of danger is something called data integrity. If someone publishes my blood type, someone publishes my bank account, well, it may be personally embarrassing because it's so small, but nonetheless, okay. I mean, there are all kinds of things that you don't want published, but if someone changes the record of my blood type, that could be fatal. Because if I go to a hospital and someone has changed my blood type, and they say, okay, let's give them a transfusion, and they give me the wrong blood type, I'll die. With my bank account, it's unlikely if someone is going to change my bank account that they will make it give me more money. Most likely they will empty my bank account. So this is a system we've had in place. What we do is that we put all critical data on blockchain, a permission blockchain. So this is not Bitcoin. It's a simple blockchain that means that you cannot change data, and it can only be changed with the permission of a permission-giving authority, but that gives us more security. Now, when we look at what all of this has done, is that, well, probably the most important thing from the original motivation of what we wanted to do is that our GDP per capita has increased incredibly. So, I mean, I only heard here today, actually, that our GDP per capita today is 49,000 US dollars purchasing power parity. That's not bad for a country that came out of complete and utter poverty at 2,800 US dollars in 1992. Another effect of digitization comes from the fact that you can't bribe a computer. What that means is that when it comes to the scourge of petty corruption, where in order to get something from the government, you have to pay someone off. You get a doctor's appointment, to get some kind of permit to build something, whatever. It's too many countries in the world operate on this principle of, well, I mean, you go see the official and he says, well, you know, but maybe if you help along, we'll get it done faster. But since you can't bribe a computer, this goes away. So, I mean, one example is our traffic police. Around the world, traffic police, they catch you and then you say, well, if you give them a little money, they let you off. You can't do that in my country because a speeding ticket doesn't count unless you have a digital record of the time, the place, the speed recorded on the radar, who the officer was, and there's nothing you can do. You can offer him any amount of money. You can't change that what is already recorded. And all kinds of issues of going to getting a permit or something, they go away because there's nothing you can do because you do it online. I explained this 6-7 years ago to an official from India, from a state in India, not the federal government. And he said, we can never do that. I said, why not? He goes, well, our country or our state runs on the principle that we don't really pay our civil servants knowing they're going to take a cut from everything they do. I said, so, I mean, that's the worst reason I ever heard not to digitize public services, but nonetheless, that is true. So there is a negative side you're going to have to worry about. I mean, if you think your civil servants are living because of petty corruption, well, you're going to have to deal with that issue. But in terms of corruption, when I mentioned that we have, in the beginning, that we are no longer one of those East European corrupt countries, basically less corrupt than us inside the European Union are Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Netherlands, Germany, and Luxembourg. And all the other countries, well, we're at the same level with Ireland, but all the other countries, the ones that used to lecture us, they all have higher corruption than us. So this is something completely due and only due to digitization of public services. Other effects? Well, one of the effects of starting with education 30 years ago, today, I mean, you probably know that education reform takes 15 to 20 years to have an effect. So when I left office, before I left office, I would go and I would visit startups. We have a lot of startups. And I go, well, how'd you get started in this? What made you do this? And I'd say 80% of the time, I get this 28 or 32-year-old woman or man saying, well, oh, I was a kid in that program you did back in the 90s. Seemed to have worked. One thing that happened in my country which had a huge effect was that while everyone thinks of it as a Swedish company, the entire technology, software for Skype was invented in Estonia by 4 young guys in their 20s. This had a tremendous impact on society because everyone's going, I live in this poor little East European country with terrible weather and it's cold and it's rainy and there's nothing's ever going to come out of this. And suddenly 4 guys in their mid-20s have become millionaires with a worldwide brand, which made people, students, say, maybe I should study math and engineering. I mean, so we had this upsurge in STEM subjects. What it's gotten to today is that Estonia has a unicorn that is a $1 billion company for every 130,000 persons. Before, the speaker before me said highest per capita, that's another way of saying. Next is Israel with about 1 unicorn per 800,000 people. So, Now, one of the other effects of this was, I mean, with these unicorns, with our GDP rising, with companies, basically a number of companies had moved out of Estonia because it's easier to get money in the United States on Sand Hill Road in Palo Alto or Menlo Park, whatever it is. And they started coming back because life in Estonia had become pretty decent. I mean, it's kind of a normal Western European country in terms of quality of life, quality of roads, quality of healthcare. In education, the PISA scores of Estonian students are the highest of any non-Asian country. So we're ahead of everybody except for the Chinese, the Singaporeans, Japanese, and Koreans. But if you come to Europe, we're ahead of everybody in Europe, not to mention the United States and Canada. Part of which I attribute to people really paying attention to STEM subjects. So now people are coming back. We no longer have massive emigration. We don't really have, we're at a zero saldo. So as many people leave as come back in, so, which is not a bad position to be in. When I think of where we are today, and when I think of where Guatemala is today, I would say that there's a clear path that you can follow, but it is, of course, not enough anymore. If you remember your Alice and the Red Queen in your Alice in Wonderland, when Alice complains that she's running and running, but she's not getting anywhere because what's the quote? You're not getting anywhere. I'm just running and running, but I'm still in the same place. And then the Red Queen says to her, a slow sort of country you're from. Now here, you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you have to run at least twice as fast as that. And that is where the challenges lie now. That even if you adopt what we did, which I would encourage you to do, but there's more to do because lots of countries are getting to where we are. I mean, in the neighborhood, Costa Rica is working very closely with Estonia to get there. And so, as the previous speaker said, I mean, the next thing to develop, which we are doing as much as we can, is actually to implement AI to government services, which would mean a change in the nature of thinking about government. Government is not there to be something that you have to deal with. Rather, government becomes a service that'll tell you, oh, by the way, you should go get a checkup because you're this age, or it's been this much time since you did this or did that. I mean, AI in public services, AI is going to be everywhere, but AI in public services is one area where I would recommend any country to start focusing on once they have the digital e-governance architecture and system in place. What we also have, well, 20 years ago, I helped set up an NGO in Estonia, which is called the E-Governance Academy. You can look it up. It's ega.ee. And it's an NGO that now does, across the world, basically, assists in developing e-governance systems. We have like 40 people in Ukraine right now, 10 in Moldova. We're supposed to have one person here, I think. I don't know if that person is here today, but in any case, hola, ¿qué tal? No puedo. But the point is, we're happy to do that. So if you guys are interested, this NGO will will help out, because there's many of the same people who designed our system. Now they're getting old like me, and you might as well do kind of like stuff that, help out other people. And these are the kinds of things that one can do. I would encourage all of you also to think independently. Don't just copy what some Estonians do or someone else does. You come up with your own solutions. We invented the X-Road platform because we had to do something, because we didn't have the money to solve the problem. So you have lots of really smart people here. Use them to come up with your solutions. Don't just take solutions that, especially don't take the solutions that Ernst & Young and McKinsey will give you, but also the solutions offered by Estonians or anyone else who's going to be offering you solutions. Listen to them, study them, but this should be, you need ownership of this thing. You need to do it on your own and come up with your own way of doing things. And this is something that it's up to you. One place where AI, for example, I think you're uniquely placed. Someone told me yesterday, we have 23 minority languages in Guatemala. Well, before AI, you would have to worry about all of your population being able to read the one main language. But you don't have to do that anymore. You can now, if you do it right, implement AI to make sure your entire population, even if you can do it in their native language. That's a whole creative area that I would encourage you to take up, because, that's the way to go. Another thing that I see, and I've been arguing for a long time with a platform like X-Road, is you can actually do some really creative stuff regionally. Now, I mentioned the fact that in the European Union, 12 countries all working on one platform, you can get a digital prescription when you're sick in that other country. My goal in Europe is that you can do the same thing with your medical records. So if I get sick in Greece, and they don't even have a Latin alphabet, I will go to a doctor in Greece, authorize the doctor to read my medical records, which he can do, and he will get them in Greek, because he certainly isn't going to understand my very weird language. When I think about what we need in this region, you need, basically regional cooperation, if you adopt a common platform, can really work well, because those things that are strictly sovereign, that are strictly Guatemalan and not Costa Rican or Honduran, you do that's accessible only to people in your citizenship. On the other hand, there are a lot of things, a lot of services that you should be able to access, like digital prescriptions, if you're in a neighboring country. That certainly should be a political goal of the region, to make cross-border relations easier. On the more, on the financial side of things, one of the biggest areas of cheating on taxes is VAT, where a company will tell in my country, we'll have a company that has offices in Estonia and in Finland. They will tell the Estonian government, we paid up there in Finland. In Finland, they'll say, no, we paid our VAT down there in Estonia. And we realized there was a lot of tax cheating going on. And so we basically got together with the finance ministry of Finland and said, well, why don't we just start comparing who's doing what? And we passed the law. And we were nice. We gave them 6 months to comply, and every month tax compliance rose at an incredible rate, and we started making more money. In fact, digitizing our tax system allowed us to increase our revenue so much that it was politically possible to reduce taxes. It sounds bizarre, but politically, it really works for a government to say, yeah, we don't really have to, we can reduce the tax burden, and which is what we did about, well, how many years ago? 16, 15 years ago. And it was wildly popular, only because tax collection, the compliance with taxes shoots up in a hockey stick curve. It just goes up, and suddenly you have more government revenue than you planned for, and then, well, you might as well, if you want to get reelected, you reduce the tax burden. So these are all the kinds of things you can do. Personally, I think that to close here, if you don't become seriously involved in digitization of your public services and government sector, and of course with all the other effects that will be felt in the private sector, you'll fall behind and the rest of the world will move ahead. And those countries that figure it out and do digitize and move ahead will be the winners. We already see it in Europe that the countries, the old Europe countries that did not digitize or very slow, they're not the biggest or best anymore. And you can do the same thing if you digitize. So, thank you. Muchas gracias. So, just keep in mind, digitalization. Por favor.
Muchas gracias, muy amable. Le agradecemos. Un fuerte aplauso, por favor, para el expresidente Ilves, que nos acompañó hoy. Realmente una persona que destacó, como bien lo decía, y llevar la digitalización a un país y estar en aquel periodo tan importante y poniendo en el mapa a Estonia. Vamos a continuar con la agenda, ya vamos entrando en la parte final. Indudablemente hay muchos puntos importantes. Siempre que se realiza este encuentro surgen temas para agregar en la agenda y en la relación, por supuesto, que cada uno de estos temas puede tener dentro del contexto nacional. Certeza jurídica, un tema básico, fundamental. ¿Cuáles son las prioridades? ¿Cuáles son los puntos fundamentales que está trabajando la administración actual? Me da mucho gusto presentar, señoras y señores, en este escenario, y va a hacer ingreso en este momento, al señor presidente constitucional